Coogs House. All right. Y'all ask questions. We've got answers. But man, y'all got a lot of questions about what conference. I thought we figured out what conference we're going to be in.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you get the latest in the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. And welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is good to see you again. Remember, at 1,250 subscribers, because every 250 we're giving something away. We're giving away one of these hats, the Coog Paw, Locked On Coog, little Nike dry fit, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube so we get there, and then like and comment on the video to let us know you're in the contest. If after today's episode you have all your questions answered and you don't know what to say, tell us if you like your pancake or waffle dry or drenched in syrup. Those are the only two options. You can't pick in the in between. I'm looking at you. Yes, the everydayer. They're like, some go somewhere in between on my answers. No, pick one. Pick one. All right. So today's episode, we're going to do a couple things. Answering some questions. We sent out a mailbag question request. There were a handful. I'm going to pick 4 to answer. 2 are a little bit bigger. And then the third segment's going to have the last 2 kind of go a little bit shorter. So the first one's going to be about Big 12/Big 10. It may make more sense in a second. Third one's going to be about the football program going into the Big 12. And then the third and final segment is going to have a quick question on basketball and a quick question on baseball that I don't think will take that long. So they get the segment kind of lumped together. But first, let's talk some about a question from one Juan. Juan's from Houston. Juan asks, people around the college football scene, parentheses, not Houston fans, seem to think U of H is on the list for Big 10 inclusion in the future after U of H gets AAU inclusion. Do you think this could ever happen? Why would they be interested in Houston specifically? Why would the SEC try to prevent this move? Again, that's from Juan in Houston. Now, first, let's cover a couple things. One, Juan mentions that Houston is aiming to join the AAU. That's the Association of American Universities. It's currently like 62 or 65. I saw both numbers listed. Distinguished research universities in America. And President Couture has mentioned that she wants the University of Houston to get into that game academically. For what it's worth, that is like some of the most invested research universities in America. Instead of Texas, the 3 in it currently are Texas A&M, Texas, and Rice. So you're looking at those kinds of large academic focused institutions to the degree that Texas and Texas A&M are, right? But the idea that you're putting a lot of money into the academic side of things. The interesting thing about this is that Houston's what you call an R1 research facility right now. So it's like growing. And for what it's worth, Houston is like under Couture, looking to improve the academic program very, very intensely. And frankly, what's kind of a short window. So like that Houston degree may look pretty strong in the near future. Not that it never didn't, but like it's going to look better, I think, by the time Couture is done with the university. I say that to say that I didn't necessarily realize, I just always knew that the Big 10 was a fairly academic focused set of schools. But in looking, it was interesting to see that, look at all the schools in the Association of American Universities. And as far as the Big 10 schools go, you're adding USC and UCLA. They're both in the AAU. Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern Wisconsin, Purdue, and Rutgers are all in this Association of American universities, all in this top-end echelon of research institutions. That's basically the whole Big 10, except for Nebraska. Do we tell Nebraska? Should we tell Nebraska? Tell me in the comments. But Nebraska is not, and to be fair, Nebraska was in actual once upon a time, back when Nebraska was a Big 12 school. I had to Google this story. This is an interesting one and maybe worth your own Google. Nebraska was kicked out of the AAU in 2011 because their main research was actually happening at many of their satellite campuses around the state of Nebraska. And the AAU decided, That's not really the same thing as being a major research institution and took their status away. Now, if Houston were to continue to build towards being one of those academic programs, it feels like that'd be kind of the basic baseline criteria of getting into the Big Ten from the Big 12 one day. This is kind of a question, I guess, because theoretically, the Big Ten will be looking to ask what schools want to join in 2030. The Big 12 TV deal ends in 2031. You could kind of have some of that talk happening as soon as then, if not at the end of the next TV set of contracts, right? As it currently stands, the Big Ten does not have a foothold in the state of Texas, and Houston would offer that. Further, Houston offers a very specific foothold in the state of Texas because it would be, if the Couture plan goes through, one of those universities, A&M, Rice, Texas, and then Houston being the fourth from the state of Texas that's in that AAU, and it's in a major metropolitan area, which seems to be important as you look at the schools that the Big Ten has been adding, right? You currently have, they just added LA by adding USC and UCLA. They added the New York area by adding New Jersey, Rutgers, right? Not that long ago. They added the DC area when they added Maryland. That's not a very far drive if you're in the DMV, right? They already had Chicago with Northwestern. They kind of have Pennsylvania and Philly. They have this foothold in these major large cities. And Houston is considered the 8th largest market for television in the country. Now, markets because the Bay Area is one market and DFW is one market. Obviously, it's the 4th biggest city in the country. Houston is that. And so this idea that Houston kind of checks lots of boxes if they get their academics there is an interesting one. I think the thing that Houston has to also focus on, and frankly, it'd be more of the focus of this podcast, although many would probably argue it's not as important, is the football program needs to also look like a Big Ten football program. Now, that's not necessarily saying they've got to be Ohio State and Michigan every year, although that'd be a lot of fun. What it does mean, though, is you've got to keep the kids from the Houston area here, keep at least Texas kids coming to Houston, and produce. I mean, you got to at least produce. Wisconsin has a good run of the thing every couple years. Iowa plays a boring brand of football and didn't score a whole lot of points last season. Well, on the whole, they'll put out pros. They're a decent program. Obviously, you've got Michigan State has had up years. Northwestern, as an academic institution, even has had years they've won their half of the Big Ten. Penn State has put out the Micah Parsons of the world. These kinds of places all have strong football programs, and so Houston needs to get into the play in that. I think that 12-2 Houston, with freshman All McCaskill looking like he's going to be an all-world guy, Clayton Tune and Tank Dell would both going to be future pros. They are on that team. Marcus Jones would be an all-rookie kind of guy. He was on that team. Those kinds of guys look like that. Frankly, even having Ed Oliver type recruits look like that, right? Suddenly, you're looking at a program that looks like it actually could step in from a football perspective. We both know that Houston could fit in a basketball perspective. That's not a question we even have to go down there. I mean, Sampson's ready. Indiana invited him for a reason, right? He'd be ready to go do that. The Big Ten does care a lot about these markets, and I could see why Houston would be appealing for them. And so this hypothetical that Juan is asking about, I think, is intriguing. I will say I could see the reason for the Big Ten to want Houston if Houston can show over the course of this Big 12 contract they're entering into that they can perform at that kind of a level. If they, maybe they take some knocks on the chin this first season, but if they can be a true top half of the conference or competitive more often than not Houston football program, I think that it makes sense. Now, would I want it? I think I actually have to say yes, and I'm going to get into the dollars and cents why I have to say yes in a moment, but it pains my heart to have just gotten into the Big 12 and me talking about leaving at the next contract. So, Juan, that one hurt right in the chest. But so here's the deal, is we're looking at just cash, just pure dollars and cents here. And if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And we look at the contracts and the money because the Big 10 deal is starting in just this summer, and then the Big 12 deal will start after Texas and Oklahoma leave next summer for the Big 12. The current Big 12 deal that they'll be entering into next summer, school, and I'm saying loosely because there still could be changes, more schools come in, and this and the other thing, but it looks like you're looking at $31.6 million per year, from TV revenues as a Big 12 school, considerably higher than anything Houston's ever seen before. The same time period of contract for the Big 10 schools, ESPN's reported anywhere between $80 and $100 million per year per school. Now, they have more schools in said conference once they add USC and UCLA, and are paying 3 times as much money. I am enthusiastic to join the Big 12. I think it'll be great, best basketball conference in America. It'll be a great, great time. It makes a ton of geographic sense. But that's 3 times the cash. Never mind that part of the reason you want to join the Big 12 was to get some of those old Southwest Conference rivalries going. And some of those Southwest Conference schools, Arkansas, A&M, and Texas, are now left to the SEC. So you don't even get those. You'd be the lone Texas school in said conference. You'd be able to pitch that in a way that other schools in the conference in the state could not in recruiting. And frankly, you'd open up other avenues with all of that cash to, help out recruits with facilities and stuff like that. I think it's a big, big deal. If it offered, and I could see why it would, I would kind of have a hard time turning that down. If the academic program does get the level that Couture mentions it could, I guess we'll see. I think that would make sense. The holdups there being the consistency of the football program and how quickly does Houston become the academic institution that Couture wants it to become. I say quickly because I think it will. It's just how fast are we talking here? The second question we're going to answer is going to be more about Houston and the conference they're about to be in. I promise, the Big 12. But first, let's talk about our buddies at Built Bar. Now, I just got a new delivery of these over the weekend, and I've actually got a new favorite, I think. Don't tell the coconut almond. But if you're looking for a delicious snack and you don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need to get the best tasting protein bar out there, Built. You got to try this. I'm a person that likes to grab 1 or 2 of these on the go because they're healthy and taste great. Trust me, they do taste amazing. So amazing, you won't think that they're good for you. I just got the cookie dough bite puff. It's got like cookie dough bites on top of puff, and like every single Built Bar out there, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Trust me, those things are phenomenal. That's the one I'm going with right now. That's my new favorite. I'm grabbing a couple of those every morning for breakfast. Grab them on the way out the door. They got amazing macros. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein in most bars. And now you don't need to wait to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, or you can still get your specialty flavors at Built.com. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club and that's more your style, you can grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter, puff, and churro puff. Trust me and thank me later. That cookie dough puff thing, oh my Lord. All right, so I mentioned that the second question has to do with Houston in the Big 12. So let's read it. We got from Shaka in Kentucky with the U of H making the move to the Big 12. What position group would you say is the most Power 5 ready? Which group has you the most concerned? Again, this is from Shaka in Kentucky. Now, I have to say which one is the most ready was probably the easiest question I got asked. And I felt almost like I was cheating when I said like that's one of the ones I want to answer, because it's got to be the wide receivers. I did a whole episode a couple months back at this point about how Houston could quickly turn into wide receiver U with the talent coming from the city and the kids already on campus. But just speaking of purely returners we've seen and had our eyes on, Matthew Golden set their freshman touchdown receiving record last year. He also had 2 different 100-yard games in his final 5 games of the season. Matthew Golden will be a pro football player. Mark it now. Go to your FanDuel sport. Go to books with it. He will be a pro football player when it's all said and done. He is a tremendous wide receiver talent. Sam Brown is a similar kind of case where he has a kind of a hothead. As a redshirt sophomore last year, he was second on the team in catches. He was a West Virginia product the year before. Understand what Big 12 football looks like, and again was fairly consistent throughout the season, even if he had that little spat at the end of the Tulsa game or whatever. Right. One guy I think that people kind of forget about. One kid is Joseph Manjack. The fourth was originally a USC transfer into the University of Houston, a tomball kid. So coming back home, right? Had that giant catch of SportsCenter top 10. If you go like Google top plays of the 2022 college football season, He is like in the top 10 on every type of thing for his catch against UTSA to open last season. He's coming back. He missed 8 games hurt last season, so I think people kind of forget about him because of all the time he spent hurt. Joshua Cobbs, a Wyoming transfer, 6'4", 205, and he played in that Wyoming offense. So I think people kind of think like, oh, what's he going to do? They didn't look at his stats or so. But like Wyoming doesn't pass the football. You look at what he did there. He had 25 catches and was second on the team in catches. So he's like their second most like guy to go to. And he had 9.8 yards per catch. So those catches turn into big plays against 6'4", 205, big body kid. One guy I'm getting a lot of stuff from some of my people that I talk to about like insider information kind of stuff, like what they're seeing at practice or whatever, is a kid named Stephon Johnson, Oklahoma State transfer. Didn't play a lot with Oklahoma State, so he wanted to transfer to Houston, but he did have 2 touchdowns and an 84-yarder against Wisconsin, the 84-yarder being against Wisconsin. Very high talented and high recruited kid, and like Houston's a great spot for him to start over against a busy wide receiver room. But that's not a bad thing. And that's just the guys that were there this spring. Mikhail Harrison-Pilot is the 4th highest ranked recruit in the history of Houston Cougar football, as far as like the modern recruit rankings go. And he's looking like he's going to be a wide receiver. He lives in 88, and I guess some places thought about playing him at safety. I think one of the reasons he's coming to Houston is to play on the offensive side. But he's a high-end prospect, had a great Army All-American game. I mean, he's the real deal. He is likely a pro as well. I could also see them, for what it's worth, maybe not this season, but at a later date, putting him as a wildcat quarterback type guy. That was one thing Temple did with him a lot. Obviously, he comes to Houston because his dad and stepmom were both Houston athletes, and so that's part of the reason we got him on campus. Not typically the kind of recruit you see coming to University of Houston, and I think that that's going to show up when he gets out there and gets those first couple touchdown catches next season. A kid that probably doesn't get the same pub because he's not the same like national level recruit, but was a high-end 4-star from Fort Bend Marshall, is Jacoby Banks. He's a small, scatty guy, 5'9", but has a ton of wiggle to him and like big shoulders. Like I think, it might not be his freshman season, but I think he will be an impact player in his redshirt freshman season or thereafter. So look for his name on the lineups as well. And then with some injuries, I guess I could see him working in. I think he's ready. It's just a busy room, right? Just a busy room. So I think that whole room looks ready for the Big 12. One thing I have to say, though, is I think that the underrated room that might be ready as well is actually the quarterback room. And I know that people thought I was probably going to say D-line room there because, Sac Ave. But both guys come from Power 5 programs. Like Lucas Coley was at Arkansas first, and Donovan Smith was at Texas Tech first, and they transferred to Houston. I guess Coley transferred a little over a year ago, and Smith about 3 or 4 months ago. But on the whole, they both have an idea of what Power 5 football looks like. They both, frankly, have different unique talents. They both are big, strong guys that can run and have some wiggle when they get out there run too. So when they get into trouble, I feel like that escapability I think is really, really key. But the group I have the most concern about, and I don't feel fair about saying this because I would always say the group I have the most concern about and moving from the American to the Big 12 would be the offensive line. But it is the offensive line. Now, I would always have that concern because that's the biggest difference. And you move from division or from a conference to conference in football. You move up into the Power 5. It's the offensive line. You move from one of the 4 non-SEC Power 5s to the SEC. It's going to be the offensive line. Even if you've got a strong offensive line, it comes down to the depth of the offensive line. What does your second team guard look like? What does your second team center look like? Right. That's just kind of how the differentiations are played here. I say that though, and truthfully, it was a high-ranking Pro Football Focus offensive line that's in all their analytics and stuff last year. In terms of pass blocking, they did change coaches and are looking to do more run blocking next season. Nemanja Gavi comes from Tulane, right? So you think about Tajay Spears and what they did there. A little bit different system. That said, Patrick Paul is a pro at left tackle, 6'7", 315, and we'll be calling his name out this time next season, or this time next NFL draft, I guess, what is that, next May, next late April. Jack Freeman returns at center. He's a 6th-year guy, and it was great for Houston last year in his first year as a full-time starter. I imagine you also see Tyler Johnson, Tank Jenkins, and Ruben Unije as the other 3 starters, but I guess I also see Jalen Garth sliding in some spots. Pancake Hunter's another center, so I don't think he'll start in front of Freeman, but you could see he apparently, per the people that tell me about what's going on, he had a great time at spring camp and great spring camp, I guess, and spring practices. I kind of wish we got to see a spring game just to watch his development. But But I think that he had a really good set of practices there. So does he work in at more of a guard spot? Maybe, who knows, right? Then like Shamar Hobdy Lee is a giant kid that got in from FIU. I don't know what the jump from FIU to Big 12 football will be, but he played pretty well at FIU. So what's the balance look like for him? It's always going to be a concern for me because at the dividing line between most conferences and football. The other group quickly that I think has me a little concerned, though, is because I'm kind of still learning the names and who does what well, is the DB room. And without a spring game to watch, I'm just kind of going on here saying word of mouth. But like Adari Halsey was a big-time transfer from New Mexico, and he's a four-pin Marshall kid, but he had 87 tackles as a true freshman last season in New Mexico. But I haven't laid eyes on him in a Houston Coug uniform, really. Isaiah Hamilton had a strong spring by everything I've heard. He was at Texas Southern and Channelview kid, Houston through and through, right? But 2022 is kind of his first year starting, but he also had 5 picks. So like, what does that tell us about him in that conference? Because once you have a couple picks, it kind of stop throwing your side of the field, right? Brian George is a Texas A&M transfer and kind of had uneven playing time, like played a lot as a younger kid there, but played a little bit less last year. What does that say about him? But Brian George had a fairly significant statistical impact while he was at Texas A&M. So again, these are guys and names I'm still learning in the secondary, and like moving Hassan Hippolyte up in the linebacker line, like that doesn't help me feel more comfortable about these guys back there. So I almost have some concern about the DB room just because I'm still figuring out who does what well. If you've got other comments, questions, concerns, or if you got, think I'm wrong on some stuff, tell me down below and tell Shaka what you think as well. I said in the third segment, I have 2 different questions, one about basketball, one about baseball I want to jump into. They're kind of a little bit shorter though. So let's jump on in and let's do basketball first. So the basketball question comes from Brian in Pearland. The basketball team has 1 scholarship left for 2023-24 season. They still don't have a 7-footer. Why would they go for a forward or wing in the transfer portal? I'm assuming he's talking about over a 7-footer. Again, that's Brian in Pearland. And I think that's a fair question. You move in the Big 12, you see Hunter Dickinson go to Kansas, and you see Dylan DeSue is coming back to UT Austin, and those kinds of things. But honestly, and this is just this analyst and host's opinion, Sampson's done a great job and has always done a great job with these undersized, high motor bigs because of the things they ask them to do. It's hard to find that kind of talent in a 7-footer. There's not a whole lot of those guys in the world that move like Sampson needs them to move, but also are 7 feet tall. I mean, Josh Carlton was kind of a unique find for the University of Houston. And he was a UConn transfer, right? He wasn't an original, and that's not to say that he's any less of a Cougar, but as far as like finding kids to fill that role, there aren't that many out there. And like that one started at UConn, which is kind of a blue blood, right? Especially when you think about like where Houston was when he was coming out of high school. Houston wasn't Sampson was building it, but it wasn't the kind of program that he was going to come to, right? He's going to go to a place like UConn, and then Houston turned into a place that he'd come, and then he came, right, and had a great time at Elite 18, right? The Final Four team, though, the year before, had 6'8" Reggie Chaney starting as the big guy, right? I mean, Fabian White played a lot of small center type stuff at 6'8" as well. You think about last year's team, Juwan Roberts, and Javier Francis. He never really went true small ball with Jarris there. But the goal there is to get these 6'8", 6'9" guys that are maybe rangy with long arms to kind of make up for some of it, because truthfully, that's as important as anything, is how high is your standing reach, because your standing reach helps you defend the rim. And then the other half of that equation quickly becomes, can you switch on the perimeter? How are you in the help side? Do you get to slide over for charges? Can you come defend both sides of the rim on the two-step gallop? Like the kind of intricacies that Houston is playing with defensively as a center require guys that are really, really athletic, and there just aren't that many guys that can do those things and are 7 feet tall. So I wish they could find a 7-footer to do those things. But truthfully, even like all the things Hunter Dickinson does really well, I don't think he can do the defense. Like Houston would change the way they cover people next season compared to how they've had success doing things the last 3-4 seasons. just to fit Hunter Dickinson? And do you do that for a transfer that you get for a year? Right? I don't know if you do that or not. And clearly, again, we'll see how they spend that scholarship, but it does not look like that's how they're spending it. And so I don't think they're going to. And we can disagree here, but I kind of get it because they've had some success doing what they've been doing. Speaking of success, the last question of the day comes from Katie. I can't tell if that's the person's name or the place. So when you do these questions and you send them into locoogspod@gmail.com, please tell us your name and location next time. Katie from Katie. We'll say Katie from Katie. Her question was that Houston baseball has won every conference series this year. Why aren't they ranked higher than 30th? Even though they beat ECU, ECU is ranked 14th. Now, Katie from Katie, I feel bad. Your name's probably not Katie, or you're probably not from Katie, and I apologize. But honestly, that's just how bad they were before conference play started. So remember, they were 12-13. They at one point were 5-11 or something like that. And they had a bunch of pitching injuries. Were dealing with a lot of crap. And frankly, it kind of went under the radar because basketball season was still ending and football season was in spring practice, and it just wasn't in the news a whole lot, right? But they were bad until the end of March. And then since that last day of March, when they started conference play against East Carolina, they've gone 19-7, and they've won 15 of their 20 conference baseball games. They've won every conference series, as you mentioned, Katie, and they've really seen the bats come to life. They haven't necessarily needed great pitching, although they've gotten some great performances. They're putting up runs left and right. It doesn't matter who they're playing. And since, that's been happening in conference play, your ranking is going to be largely based on, who is in your conference. And since East Carolina, they haven't played teams that are drawing a lot of national eyeballs. And that just kind of means that Houston's flying under the radar, as Houston sports will tend to do. For what it's worth, I do think that you'll kind of see some eyes get raised in the American Athletic Conference tournament, especially if the success continues. Frankly, I think most pundits around the country would put the AAC as a one team in the regional league. But if Houston were to beat ECU in conference in the tournament, they might actually put Houston and then put in ECU as an at-large. So I could see it shifting gears there a little bit. I hope to, on my calendar down here, have more on this later this week with the baseball specialist coming on, because honestly, I picked up the season kind of in that late March, early April run. And frankly, I had the games going on my phone as they happen, but I am learning more about college baseball by the day. And so I've got a guy coming on, I think, later this week, if not started next week after the regular season's over, to talk more about it from a Coog perspective for sure. But make sure you subscribe so you can get that episode as soon as it hits. That's right. Subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, do all those wonderful things. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked on Cougs today. Thank you for submitting your questions. If you ever want to submit a question, even when I'm not doing normal mailbag, make sure you go to locoogspod@gmail.com. That's LOCOOGSPOD@gmail.com. I'll answer all the questions I can. Thank you also again so much for tuning in today and making us your first listen of the day. I'm going to recommend Locked on College Basketball as your second listen, because I just answered that question with the transfer portal, and I know they're covering all the chaos that's happening over there very, very well. So go check out Andy and Isaac there. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Locked on Cougs, the primary Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.